This isn't just another crime headline. It's a case about trust betrayed, red flags overlooked, and justice delayed for far too long. And while the arrest of Sean Gardner has finally brought relief to some, it also raises haunting questions. How many children were hurt while institutions looked the other way? Stay with me, because once you hear how this case unfolded, you'll understand why the gymnastics world may never be the same. Start a story. Before the arrest, before the FBI raids, before the headlines, there were signs. Subtle at first, easy to dismiss, but in hindsight they were warnings of something much darker. Sean Gardner wasn't just any coach. He worked at Chow's Gymnastics and Dance Institute in Iowa, one of the most respected gymnastics academies in the United States. This wasn't a local recreational gym. This was a place where future Olympians trained, where parents dreamed their children could one day become champions on the world stage. To outsiders, Gardner seemed like the perfect fit. He was knowledgeable, professional, and disciplined. Parents admired his tough coaching style. He demanded excellence from his athletes, and for years, no one questioned it. But behind the strict discipline, some noticed things that didn't feel right. Athletes began sharing stories of odd behavior. They described moments where Gardner's attention went beyond coaching. Some said he asked uncomfortable personal questions. Others remembered his tendency to linger in spaces where athletes expected privacy. At first, most brushed it off. After all, he was the coach. Maybe he was just intense. Maybe he was just being strict. That's what parents told themselves. That's what athletes convinced themselves to believe. But the feelings didn't go away. Parents started noticing too. Some felt uneasy when Gardner insisted on private one-on-one training sessions, or when he discouraged parents from watching practices. A few voiced concerns to the academy, but those complaints never seemed to gain traction. It's important to understand the culture of gymnastics at the time. Success came with sacrifice. Coaches were given enormous power, and parents often felt pressure not to question authority. When issues were raised, they were too often dismissed as misunderstandings or worse, ignored to protect the academy's reputation. For Gardner, this culture became a shield. The whispers about his behavior never became more than that, whispers. He continued working, continued coaching, and continued hiding in plain sight. Some gymnasts, now adults, have since come forward. They recall feeling a sense of dread around him. They didn't always have the words to explain why, but they knew something was wrong. And when they tried to speak, their voices were quieted. One parent remembers going to the academy leadership with concerns about Gardner's conduct. She says she was told not to worry, that Gardner was a respected coach, that nothing inappropriate was happening. Her child, she was assured, was safe. But deep down, she never fully believed it. For years, the pattern repeated. Subtle warnings, uneasy parents, athletes whispering among themselves. But every time, the concerns fell through the cracks. And then, suddenly Gardner was gone. He left Chow's Gymnastics quietly. No public scandal, no major explanation. Just gone. At the time, many assumed it was for personal reasons. Maybe a career change, maybe burnout, maybe conflict with management. Whatever the reason, people didn't ask too many questions. But here's the chilling part. When Gardner walked away, the questions didn't. They lingered. Parents and athletes wondered why. Some suspected more than they dared to say out loud. But without proof, without evidence, the whispers remained just that, whispers. And so life went on. Chow's Gymnastics continued producing champions. Parents continued enrolling their children. And Gardner faded into the background. But the story didn't end there. Because those early concerns, the ones ignored, dismissed, or silenced, would one day resurface. And when they did, they would expose a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. This was the calm before the storm. The years when warning signs went unnoticed. The years when children could have been protected but weren't. Because behind the trophies, behind the discipline, and behind the reputation of excellence, Sean Gardner was already living a double life. And it would take the FBI years to finally uncover just how deep that darkness went. In 2024, nearly a decade after those first uneasy whispers, the case of Sean Gardner was reopened. It started with new allegations, claims that hinted at more than just odd behavior. This time, federal investigators were listening. The FBI's Child Exploitation and Human Trafficking Task Force took the lead, determined to uncover the truth. What began as a quiet inquiry soon turned into a full-scale federal investigation. Agents began retracing Gardner's past. They interviewed former gymnasts, parents, and colleagues. They reviewed the old complaints, the ones that had been brushed aside. Each interview revealed the same troubling pattern: concerns ignored, questions unanswered, and suspicions that had never been investigated. But talk wasn't enough. The FBI needed evidence. That's when investigators dug into Gardner's digital footprint. They obtained search warrants, combed through his emails, cloud storage, and old devices. What they discovered was chilling. On Gardner's hard drives, investigators uncovered hundreds of files of child sexual abuse material, images and videos so disturbing, they confirmed everyone's worst fears. But it didn't stop there. Hidden folders revealed videos from inside the gymnastics facility itself. The FBI discovered that Gardner had secretly placed hidden cameras inside locker rooms and changing areas, recording his athletes without their knowledge. These weren't accidental recordings. They were deliberate, carefully set up, and meticulously saved. Each file was a violation. Each file was a child's stolen privacy. And together, they painted a horrifying picture of a man who had exploited his position of trust for years. One agent described it as a betrayal layered in deception. Gardner wasn't just in possession of illegal material, he had produced it himself, right inside the academy where children thought they were safe. And the more they dug, the worse it got. Investigators found evidence that Gardner had shared files online and even transported material across state lines, using encrypted platforms to hide his activity. This wasn't a single mistake. This was a pattern, a system, a double life carefully hidden behind the mask of a respected coach. By mid-2025, the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI had enough to prove that Gardner had committed multiple federal crimes, including production, possession, and transportation of child sexual abuse material. Every recovered file was cataloged. Every recording linked back to him. Forensic experts reconstructed timelines, matching footage to Gardner's time at the academy. The more agents uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just misconduct. This was a predator who had infiltrated one of the most prestigious gyms in America and gotten away with it for years. Behind the trophies, behind the smiles at competitions, behind the carefully crafted image of excellence, Sean Gardner was hiding a secret life that would one day shock the gymnastics world to its core. And with the evidence in hand, the FBI prepared to make their move. In the summer of 2025, they were ready to bring Gardner's hidden world crashing down. The next step would change everything: the arrest. By the summer of 2025, the FBI had everything they needed: the files, the recordings, the witness statements. For months, agents had been watching Sean Gardner's every move, carefully building a case airtight enough to hold up in federal court. And then, the day came. On a quiet morning in August, federal agents surrounded Gardner's home in Iowa. The neighborhood was still waking up. To the casual eye, it looked like any other day. But for Gardner, it was the end of a double life. FBI vehicles rolled in silently, blocking exits. Armed agents moved in formation. Their radios crackled with short commands. And when the knock came at Gardner's door, it wasn't a request. It was an order. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Open the door. Gardner, once the trusted coach of future Olympians, was now a suspect cornered in his own home. Within minutes, he was in custody, handcuffed, silent. The man who once stood in front of children as a mentor was now standing in front of agents as an accused predator. The charges read like a nightmare: production of child sexual abuse material, possession of hundreds of illicit files, transportation of those files across state lines. Each one carried decades of prison time. Each one represented a betrayal of the young athletes who once trusted him. Prosecutors later revealed that if convicted, Gardner could face up to 30 years in federal prison. For parents and survivors, the arrest was a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief, because justice was finally within reach, but heartbreak, because it had taken so long. Many asked the same haunting question: how many children could have been protected if the early warnings had been taken seriously? News of the arrest spread quickly. Headlines described it as another devastating blow to U.S. gymnastics, still reeling from the Larry Nassar scandal. Parents demanded answers. Survivors began speaking out. And Chow's Gymnastics, the once celebrated academy where champions were trained, was now forced to answer for the shadows that had been ignored for too long. Outside the courtroom, one parent said, "We trusted them with our children. And now, we live with the guilt that our trust was misplaced." For survivors, Gardner's arrest didn't erase the trauma. But it was a step toward justice, a step toward accountability, and a message that no matter how long it takes, the truth will find you. Sean Gardner's arrest wasn't just about one man. It was about a system, a culture, and the consequences of silence. Because in the world of gymnastics, this wasn't the first scandal. And sadly, it may not be the last. When Sean Gardner was led away in handcuffs, the arrest didn't just impact him. It shook an entire community. For years, Chow's Gymnastics was a name associated with excellence, discipline, and Olympic dreams. Parents enrolled their children there believing they were walking into a sanctuary of greatness. Now, that sanctuary has been exposed as a place where children's trust was violated. In the weeks after the arrest, the gymnastics world found itself asking hard questions. Former athletes began speaking publicly, some for the first time. Many recalled the unease they had felt around Gardner. A few shared that they had tried to raise concerns years earlier only to be told they were overreacting, or worse, silenced to preserve the academy's reputation. One former gymnast said, "We were taught to push through pain, to stay quiet, to focus on medals." But silence was exactly what predators like him counted on. For parents, the anger was overwhelming. They had trusted the academy not only with their children's training, but with their safety, and that trust had been shattered. Some parents admitted to feeling guilt that they hadn't pushed harder when something felt wrong, guilt that they believed the reassurances that everything was fine. Now, many of those same parents are demanding accountability not just from Gardner, but from the academy itself. Legal experts say a wave of civil lawsuits is likely to follow. Families are preparing to take Chow's Gymnastics to court, arguing that the academy failed to protect children and ignored clear warning signs. For Chow's academy, the damage to its reputation is severe. Once celebrated as a factory of champions, it is now under intense scrutiny. Investigations into its handling of complaints are underway. Sponsors and partners are distancing themselves, and a cloud of suspicion hangs over the entire institution. For survivors, the arrest brought mixed emotions. Relief that Gardner could no longer hurt anyone. Validation that their concerns were real all along. But also pain. Pain that it took so many years. Pain that the system meant to protect them had failed at every turn. One survivor said quietly outside the courthouse, "We're told to trust the adults in charge. But who do you trust when the people in charge protect the wrong person?" The fallout went beyond Iowa. Across the U.S., the gymnastics community was once again reminded of its darkest truths. After Larry Nassar, many had hoped the sport was changing, that new policies and safeguards would protect young athletes. But Gardner's case proved that predators can still slip through the cracks, shielded by silence and a culture that values medals over voices. Advocates are now calling for sweeping reforms, more oversight, independent reporting systems, and protections that ensure no child is ever ignored again. The message from survivors is clear. This cannot be treated as one bad man. It must be seen as a systemic failure. A failure of leadership, of accountability, and of courage. The fallout from Sean Gardner's arrest is far from over. The lawsuits, the investigations, the community outrage, they are only just beginning. But one truth has already become undeniable. The damage caused at Chow's Gymnastics isn't just about broken trust. It's about broken childhoods, broken dreams, and the heavy cost of silence. And now, the gymnastics world must confront a painful reality. Champions were built here, but so were secrets, and those secrets nearly destroyed lives. Sean Gardner's arrest is not just the story of one man. It's the story of a system, and the ways that system has failed again and again. Because if this all feels familiar, it's because it is. Not long ago, the gymnastics world was rocked by the Larry Nassar scandal, the team doctor who abused hundreds of athletes over decades, hiding behind his white coat and a culture of silence. That scandal forced USA Gymnastics into the spotlight. Congressional hearings, survivor testimony, national outrage. It was all supposed to mark a turning point. New rules were promised. Safeguards were introduced. The message was clear: never again. And yet, here we are. Gardner's case shows that predators can still find shelter inside the very institutions built to nurture children. How? Because predators thrive in cultures of silence. They rely on authority that isn't questioned. They exploit environments where medals and trophies are valued more than the voices of young athletes. And sadly, these conditions still exist in youth sports today. The bigger picture is this: abuse in sports is rarely about one bad coach or one bad doctor. It's about systems that protect reputations instead of children. It's about leaders who ignore complaints to avoid scandal. And it's about how power, whether in medicine, in coaching, or in institutions, can be weaponized against the most vulnerable. Experts say Gardner's case is part of a pattern. From local gyms to national teams, predators often use the same playbook. Earn trust by appearing disciplined and professional. Exploit authority to silence questions. Hide in plain sight, knowing institutions will hesitate to act. The result? Survivors left unheard, families left broken, and predators shielded by silence. Advocates argue that the solution isn't just stricter background checks or new policies, it's a culture shift. That means believing children when they speak, taking every concern seriously, independent systems for reporting abuse so complaints don't get buried, and accountability not just for predators, but for the institutions that enable them. Gardner's arrest is a painful reminder that reform is still unfinished. For survivors, it's proof that the fight is far from over. But it's also a reminder of something else. That silence is the predator's greatest ally. And that speaking up, no matter how small the concern, can be the difference between protection and betrayal. So yes, Sean Gardner will face justice for his crimes. But the bigger question remains, will the system face justice for its failures? Because until it does, the shadows in youth sports will remain. And somewhere out there, another predator may already be waiting. When the FBI arrested Sean Gardner in August 2025, it brought an end to his years of deception. But it didn't end the pain. For the survivors, this case is more than just headlines. It's their childhood, their trust, their safety, things that can never truly be restored. Parents who once believed their children were safe now live with guilt. Athletes who once dreamed of glory now carry scars that medals can't erase. And an academy once celebrated for creating champions is now remembered for failing to protect them. But there is another side to this story. Gardner's arrest shows that justice can still come, even after years of silence. That survivors' voices, though ignored at first, can eventually break through. And that no matter how carefully a predator hides, the truth has a way of coming to light. The lesson here is not just about Sean Gardner. It's about all of us. Because silence protects predators, not children. Because turning away from red flags allows abuse to grow. And because believing survivors is the first step in preventing the next tragedy. So what do we do now? We listen. We believe. We demand accountability not only from individuals, but from the systems that enable them. And most importantly, we refuse to let reputation, medals, or fear outweigh the safety of children. For the survivors, Gardner's arrest will never erase the trauma. But it does send a message that their pain matters, their voices matter, and their stories will not be forgotten. And for predators still hiding in positions of trust, it sends another message. The world is watching, and the walls are closing in. This case began with whispers that went ignored for years. But it ends with a truth too loud to silence. Sean Gardner's story is a reminder that justice delayed is not always justice denied. And it challenges us to ask, the next time we hear those whispers, will we listen? If you or someone you know is a victim of child abuse, please reach out for help. In the United States, you can call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-HOP. Trained advocates are there to listen, to support, and to guide you to safety. No one has to go through this alone. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, if it opened your eyes, share it. Spread awareness. Because sometimes the most powerful act is simply refusing to stay silent. I'm Your Name, and this has been the story of Sean Gardner, the coach who betrayed trust, and the survivors who refused to be forgotten. Stay safe. Stay aware. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, then hit the bell so you never miss our next deep dive.